Good to see everybody. If you got Bibles with you, let's continue our study in the series of Samuel, 1 Samuel. We're going to chapter 7 today, and I think it's going to speak to your heart. It certainly spoke to mine in the preparation of the message, and let me tell you why. Because all too often, I find myself in spiritual doldrums. Kind of a malaise settles over my life, and I get lost in the routine. What 1 Samuel chapter 7 is going to remind us is God of the routine. He's God of the malaise. He's God even in the spiritual doldrums. Let's go back and cover how we got here to 1 Samuel chapter 7. 1 Samuel chapter 7. And let me just take a moment to speak to the people online. It's good to have you with us. I know there are a lot of people online right now. Make sure you hit the like button so that you don't get a plague upon your house. Yeah. So anyway. How did we get to 1 Samuel chapter 7? Here's how we got to 1 Samuel chapter 7. It's the year 1100, more or less, BC. Israel was very prosperous, but they had lost their way. Eli was the high priest. He wasn't doing what he's supposed to be doing. His sons Eli and Hophni were, his sons Hophni and Phinehas were serving in kind of a deputy role, deputy high priest, and they were wicked, using the temple as a place to hook up, steal, feed their fat mouths, and they were just miserable, wicked people. And so judgment came. Judgment came in the form of the Philistines, and they started attacking the nation of Israel. And Israel defaulted back to, well, we got the ark. You know, the ark was able to part the Red Sea. The ark was able to part the Jordan River. The ark has power. And so they put a lot of trust in the symbol, but not in the God who occupied the mercy seat. And they lost bad, really bad. The Philistines not only defeated the nation of Israel, killing 30,000 of them in one day, they stole the ark and took it back to the land of Philistine. And what we saw in chapters 5 and 6 was when the Philistines took it back to their cities, they put it in front of their little false god by the name of Dagon. He's a little fish god. The next day, the Philistines come on in, and Dagon is face down, really in an act of worship. It's kind of a posture of worship. So they're like, rut-row, and they prop Dagon up. They come back the next day, and Dagon is not only face down, but his head is chopped off and his arms are chopped off. And that's actually significant because that's what you did to the enemy when you defeated him militarily. And it's pretty clear the Lord said, man, this is defeated God. And I always felt sorry for the rock because God created that rock, and that rock was never intended for false worship. And I'm sure the rock was sitting there thinking, why are these idiots worshiping me? I'm a rock, you know. But how often do we do stupid things? How often do we do things that we're not created to do? Well, God's going to bring it down, and he does. And the Philistines are like, this is not good. We got to get rid of this thing. So it goes on this Philistine tour, you know, and on the back of the T-shirt, it's like, City of Ekron, City of Eshroth, and it goes on through that. In every city that it goes to, here's what happens to the Philistines. They get tumors and hemorrhoids, and they get mice and rats. It's in the Bible. Literally, they get hemorrhoids. Every single city, the ark is a pain in the bottom. So they're like, we got to get rid of it. So last chapter 6, they say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put it on a cart, because not all the Philistines are like, I'm not so sure, you know, maybe this is all happenstance. So they decide to put it on a cart, and on the cart they hitch it up to 2 cows who had just given birth, 2 cows who had never worked together, and they said, off you go. Now, what's amazing about that is that milking cows want to go back to their young. That's just the nature of cows. And 2 cows that had never worked together, they usually fight. But the Bible says immediately they went back to the land of Israel. And I take good comfort in that, because if God can lead 2 cows, he can lead my Monday. He can take care of my Tuesday. He can see me through to Wednesday. So then it gets back to the nation of Israel. Nation of Israel sees it, and they start rejoicing. Good response. But then they have a dude. And the dude's like, I'm going to look inside the ark. And you're not supposed to look inside the ark. And he looks inside the ark, and the power 50,000 Israelites die that day, and the Israelites are like, oh no, send it away. Yet again, they have the wrong response. So they send it, and it comes to the house of Abinadab. And that's where we pick up. And Abinadab receives it, and Abinadab rejoices, and the ark sits. That's where we are. So let's pick on up. I hope this is going to be a blessing to you, because Abinadab lived in a city called Kirjath-Jearim. Let's pick up. 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 1, and the men of Kirjath-Jearim came and fetched up the ark and brought it to the house of Abinadab in the hill and sanctified Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the Lord. That's good, because Eleazar is a Levite, so now the Israelites are doing it like they're supposed to have been doing it the whole time. They're letting the Levites take care of it. And it came to pass, and the ark of the and it came to pass while the ark abode in Kirjath-Jearim that the time was long. For it was 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented before the Lord. I want y'all to let that sink in for just a second. 20 years. For 20 years, they don't change a thing. You know, you can have the symbols of faith without any substance to your faith. You can have the ark in your town and no power in your life. And I want you to imagine this for just a second. You're Israel. The Ark of the Covenant's back. That's like having the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution returned to you all on the same day. And you're thinking fireworks, fanfare, TikTok's going viral. But nothing changes. For 20 years, nothing changes. It just sits in the house of Abinadab. You know, it's possible to have proximity to holy things without having any intimacy with a holy God. To sit in church and just let it be routine. You can live next to the ark and be 1,000,000 miles away from God. But here's the grace. God doesn't smite them with lightning. God doesn't send another plague of hemorrhoids. Hallelujah. Last time we have to talk about that. Here's the grace. God is patient. Verse 3, and Samuel spake unto all the house of Israel, saying, if you do return unto the Lord with all your hearts, then put away the strange gods and Asheroth from among you. Prepare your hearts unto the Lord, and serve him only. And he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. Then the children of Israel did put away Balaam and Asheroth, and serve the God only. I want to pause here, and I want to talk about this moment, not from the lens of the rebuke, because there is no rebuke. Let's look at this from the lens of radical grace, because the people have been out of alignment with God for decades. Not days, not months, not just 20 years. They have been out of sync with God for a long time. Decades of confusion, decades of idol worship, decades of spiritual drought. And here comes Samuel, not with words of condemnation, but with words of invitation. Did you catch that first phrase in verse 3? And Samuel spake unto all the house of Israel, saying, if you return to the Lord with all your hearts. I want you to notice something. Grace shows up right here before they get it right. Samuel says, if. That's not a threat, that's a promise waiting to be activated. That's the voice of God who says, come unto me, all ye who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Not because they earned it. They hadn't. Not because they figured it out. They hadn't. Not because they were consistent. They weren't. But because God is consistent. And that's the heartbeat of grace. It keeps showing up even when we haven't. What kind of God does this? It's God who says, I've been waiting here the entire time. And he doesn't shame them for their idols. He doesn't rebuke them because the ark has been mistreated. He doesn't say, You have to serve me 20 years to make up for the 20 years where you sat on your bottom. He says, look, if you want me, I'm here. I've always been here, and it's grace on full display. And Samuel isn't issuing a call for them to perform. He's issuing a call for them to return. And not because God is lonely, but because he's loving. And I need you to hear this. God doesn't love Israel more when they finally get it together. He loved them the whole time. And he didn't start listening to them because they cleaned up their spiritual resume. He listened to them because he's full of mercy. The grace of God doesn't say, get it right and then come. The grace of God says, come and I'll make it right. And so the idols didn't keep God away. Their ineptitude didn't keep God away. What kept God near is his grace. And Israel had just substituted, just really dig into this, because they had substituted God's things with idols that were easier to manage, more convenient. Baal and Ashtoreth were still among them. Pagan idols were still among them. Empty rituals, fake comfort. But here's the miracle. God did not leave the relationship that he had established. He waited patiently. And Samuel says, if you return, it's not a warning. It's a whisper. I still love you. So what is Samuel really saying here? He's not giving a speech about behavior. He's giving a sermon about belonging. He's telling the nation of Israel that they are still God's. You still belong to him. You still matter. You still have access. Because grace is not a reward at the end of the journey. It is the reason that we can start the journey to begin with. And Israel didn't need to rehearse a spiritual apology to really enjoy the relationship with God. They just needed to return. And you don't have to bargain with God. You don't have to prove your worth. Just come on home. And so Samuel's voice right here, if you return, it echoes across time. And maybe it's echoing for someone right here, right now. If you return. Because it's never been about guilt. It's always been about grace. Let's keep going. And Samuel said, gather all Israel to Mizpah, and I will pray for you unto the Lord. And they gathered together to Mizpah, and they drew water and poured it out before the Lord, and fastened on that day, and said there, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel judged the children of Israel at Mizpah. So I want you to, let's set this scene, because Israel has been spiritually drifting for how long? 20 years. But now something is shifting. The people are being drawn not to a program, not to a performance, but to a place called Mizpah. And Mizpah isn't a conference, it's a confession circle. And let's be honest, things could have gone sideways real quick based on how Israel had done things in the past. There's no big band, there's no fancy lights, there's no merch table where they're selling T-shirts. Balaam is canceled. None of that. It's just people, prayer, water, and vulnerability. And what do they do with the water in the middle of the desert? Israel is a very, very arid place. They take this water that is precious to them and they pour it out to the Lord. Now, that's kind of a weird visual. Got to be honest with you. They pour the water out. You're in the middle of a hot, dusty landscape and you're wasting good water, but actually it's not waste. It's worship. It's a symbol. It's saying, Lord, we're relying on you. And that's what they're doing right there. They're starting to worship, and this is amazing. They're pouring, and let me tell you something else. They are pouring out because God has already poured in. That's grace. The whole reason that they can pour the water out is because God has moved in their heart. The whole reason that you even thought about coming to church is because God has made you spiritually alive. You didn't get spiritually alive because you poured out water, because you said some prayer, because you did something. Your ability to say a prayer, accept the doctrine, do good works is because God has already poured into you. And how does the Bible put it? That we were spiritually dead, and He hath quickened us. He's made us alive. He did, not us. And so the whole reason they're able to pour out water right now is because God has poured into them. And this isn't them saying, hey, look, Lord, what we're doing. This is them saying, we got nothing left, but somehow, Lord, you still want us. So here, take it all. So Mizpah, when we're looking at it, it's really not about guilt. It's about grace, because I want you to notice what the verse says. It says, gather all Israel to Mizpah. He doesn't say, gather the people that haven't sinned. He doesn't say, get the background checks to me and make sure they've checked off all the list. He says, gather all and return. Because that's what grace does. Grace says, come closer. Religion says, try harder. Grace says, come as you are. Religion says, get cleaned up and pass the test. Grace says, pour it out. Fear says, hold it in. And at Mizpah, nobody's posturing, nobody's performing. People are just pouring. And they weren't pouring out of fear. They were pouring out of freedom, because that's what grace is. It's freedom. It gives you space to be honest. It gives you space to make a mistake. It gives you space to be real and to show up without shame. So let me ask you, are you still holding on to anything? Is there anything you need to pour out? What is your Mizpah? Because grace is inviting you right now not to get over it, not to get it together, but to give it to God. So whether your jar is full of fear, failure, frustration, or spiritual funk, you don't have to fake it. You can just pour it out to the Lord. Verse 7 and 8. And when the Philistines heard, it's always like that, isn't it? You make some progress, and then here comes the enemy. And when the Philistines heard that the children of Israel were gathered together to Mizpah, the lords of the Philistine went up against Israel, and the children of Israel heard it. And they were afraid. They were afraid of the Philistines. And the children of Israel said to Samuel, cease not to cry unto the Lord our God for us, that He will save us out of the land in the hand of the Philistines. So let's just be real. Because when Israel finally is getting it right, the enemy shows up. And isn't that the way it always is? Like, hey, I'm going to start giving to the church, and then the refrigerator breaks. You start serving, and then your true love goes nuts. You go for 3 days on a great diet, and then suddenly Krispy Kreme is giving out free donuts. You get on track, and the enemy shows up. And the Philistines don't care that Israel is worshiping. In fact, that's the whole reason they attacked. It says it right here. When they were worshiping, and it says, and when the Philistines heard it, they started to attack. That's how Satan and the minions of evil do it. They love to disrupt revival. So Israel finally gathers. They're finally vulnerable. They've poured it out. They're not armed. There's not a weapon among them. And they're praying. And then boom, here come the Philistines, not to pray, not to fast, but to fight. And I don't know, it just seems like that sometimes. When grace has taken root, there's this pattern. You finally start to take your faith seriously, and anxiety flares up like it never has before. You sign up to serve, and suddenly the schedule implodes. You start giving, and bye-bye water heater. And let's be honest, Israel is scared. And I love that the Bible doesn't edit that out, because it says plainly, the children of Israel were afraid. Here's the thing about grace. It doesn't mean that you're never afraid. It It means that your fear doesn't have the final say. So Israel's first reaction, this is good. It wasn't to grab a sword. It wasn't to build a wall. It wasn't to post angry scrolls on the Israelite social media. They said, hey, Samuel, don't stop praying. I want y'all to just pause and notice the growth that Israel has had. 20 years ago, these same people treated the ark like a lucky charm, like a rabbit's foot, like some talisman that they could just utilize and manipulate God. Thought about dragging the Bible into battle would guarantee him victory. That didn't end well. 30,000 dead, ark stolen. Eli, the high priest, falls off a chair, breaks his neck, and dies. But now they've learned. And they don't say, fetch the ark. They say, cry out to God. They're not leaning into symbols anymore. They're leaning into the source. And here's where it gets really good. God answers. Because even though fear may knock, grace answers the door. And maybe some of us right now are in a Mizpah moment. Fear is ringing the bell. Maybe you're waiting on a scan. Maybe fear says, what if that doesn't work? Grace will say, I've already started working. What if fear says, you're too weak? Grace says, perfect. Now I can show my strength through your weakness. You're finally stepping into freedom, into forgiveness, into full surrender, and suddenly the enemy is at the gate. Well, here's what the Lord told his disciples. Jesus said, fear not. Because fear is a very real part of life. Here they are. They're standing. And even while afraid, it's okay. Because here's the thing about grace. Grace is not the absence of threat. Grace is the presence of God in the middle of the threat, in the middle of the prison, in the middle of the storm, when your brother Lazarus is lying dead. So Israel right here, they didn't need a better army. They just needed a faithful intercessor, and they had one in Samuel. Let's keep on reading verse 9 through 11. And Samuel took a sucking lamb and offered it for a burnt offering holy unto the Lord. And Samuel, that separated him from Hophni and Phinehas. And Samuel cried unto the Lord for Israel, and the Lord heard him. And as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to battle against Israel. But the Lord thundered. The Lord thundered with a great thunder on that day upon the Philistines, and discomfited them. They were smitten before Israel. The men of Israel went out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and smote them until they came to Bethkar. So let's paint the scene right here. Because the Philistines are closing in, the Israelites are praying, Samuel is worshiping, the enemy is armed. Now, honestly, you got an armed encampment coming against you, and you got people praying, and Samuel offering a sacrifice. You didn't have to go to West Point to know this is a mismatch. Israel's going to lose this battle if you forget who's listening to the prayer. Samuel wasn't yelling into a void. He was calling to a God who hears. And God heard, and he answered. And God didn't just show up. He shows out. And the Lord thundered with a great thunder on that day. Now, that's some divine drama right there, guys, sisters. Not a whisper, not a gentle breeze, thunder. Great thunder, and not the kind that you sleep through. It's a sky-splitting, battle-stopping, enemy-scattering, enemy-destroying thunder. Let's call this what it is. It's grace in surround sound. Because let me tell you something, grace just doesn't forgive. Grace fights for us. Grace isn't just sentimental. This isn't sentimental grace. This is not the Hallmark Channel grace. This is warrior grace. This is grace that throws thunder, grace that defends, grace that steps into battle for you. And why am I saying it like that? Because y'all are the hands and feet of Christ. Sometimes it's necessary for us to stand up for the downtrodden and the poor and the outcast and the hurting. Pure religion and undefiled is to visit the widows and the children in their time of affliction. Micah 6:5 tells us, "What does the Lord require of thee but to do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with our God?" Sometimes grace fights. But let's face it, Israel didn't win that day because of superior tactics, stronger muscles. They won because God fought the battle for them, and that's the power of grace. And so often we associate grace with peace and comfort, but this scene should remind us that grace is also loud. And it's not just for the quiet times. Grace is for our crisis times as well. Because sometimes grace is a gentle nudge. Sometimes grace is a quiet whisper. Sometimes grace is a merciful reminder. But y'all, sometimes grace is a divine disruptor too. And the heavenly thunderclap came, and it tells every enemy, not today, not on my watch. And I mean, have you ever had a moment when things were going downhill so fast for you, something against all odds happened, something shifted, it wasn't luck, it was a thunder, it was grace, it was an unexpected phone call with good news, it was a diagnosis that turned out not to be terminal, it was a job that you didn't deserve but got anyway, it was a prayer that you forgot you prayed but God answered it anyway. I say that because this is the God of 1 Samuel 7. This is the God of today. And so let's pause for just a second and think about the timing. It says, as Samuel was offering, that's when God thundered, right on time. And I say that because we live in a world where it feels like the Philistines are always gathering. They're bringing fear and division and temptation and pride and idolatry. But let me tell you something. God is still thundering for his people, not just in the battlefields, but in the courtrooms, in the classrooms, in the boardrooms, in the hospital rooms. God is still thundering in the living rooms. Anywhere there is activated faith, God thunders. And the thunder wasn't just a noise. It was a memory maker. You know why this moment matters? It wasn't because Israel is never going to forget the sound of grace. The thunder of God is never just for a moment. The thunder and action of God is for a movement. And it's to remind you later, I was there with you. And I'll be with you here now, because dig this, verse 12. Then Samuel took a stone and set it between Mizpah and Shen, and called the name of it Ebenezer, saying, "Hitherto hath the Lord helped us." Now, some of us hear the name Ebenezer, and all we can think of is Scrooge. But this is the OG. This is the original game. This is the Ebenezer. Said, Samuel took a stone and set it between Mizpah and Shen and called the name of it Ebenezer. Hitherto hath the Lord helped us. Now that the thunder is quiet, now that the battle is over, now that the Philistines are on the run, Israel has raised her hands not in fear but in freedom. What do you do when grace shows up for you in those moments? You mark the moment. You just don't move on, you mark the moment. So what Samuel does is he has this stone, and he sets the stone down, and he says, because listen, grace is easy to receive. It's easy to forget too. Ever notice that? Like we'll cry out in crisis, and once the breakthrough comes, once the crisis passes, we start thinking, yeah, we made it happen. Yeah, I did that. That's why Samuel says, no. Let's put a marker down at this moment. Let's never forget that God did that. Ebenezer means literally stone of help. So Samuel names the rock Ebenezer, not after Scrooge, but after salvation. Hey man, he's saying that thunder, that wasn't us. That victory, that wasn't ours. It was grace, all grace, only grace. And I want to get real, because you need a rock too, and so do I. Most of us are pretty good at remembering the pain, but we're not always great at remembering the provision that God provides. We'll journal about the betrayal, right? We'll post about the heartbreak. We'll vent about the disappointment. But when is the last time we memorialized a miracle? And Samuel is teaching us something right here. If God did it, name it, mark it, remember it. God naming that rock is like your father. Some of y'all had fathers, not me, but I had, their fathers had names for their car, like Old Bessie. Is it necessary? No. Is it memorable? Absolutely. Oh, I can remember Old Bessie. There's something about the power of naming it. And that's what Samuel's doing right here. Now, let me tell you something. Your Ebenezer might not be a literal rock. It might be something as simple as a journal entry. A scar, a photo, a date on a calendar, something that says, I was there, and so was God. And Samuel didn't say, hey, the Lord helped us once. Read the words. Hitherto hath the Lord helped us. Hitherto is an old-fashioned word, but my goodness, it packs a modern fire. It means up until this point, all the way here and through it, through Egypt, through the wandering, through the battles, through the idolatry. God was consistent when we were chaotic, and that's grace. And God's grace doesn't expire at a stone. And let's be clear, Ebenezer wasn't just about the past, it was a bridge to the future as well. Samuel's saying, if God helped us hitherto, he's going to help us henceforth. That's the implication, because the God who thundered yesterday doesn't go silent tomorrow. He's still active, he's still fighting, and he is still present. So maybe we could ask ourselves, what is our Ebenezer moment? What battle did God see us through? What surgery did he have us? Did he hold our hand through? What season looked impossible until grace showed up? What moment deserves to be remembered with more than a sigh of relief? And maybe it was your cancer remission. Maybe it is your struggle. Maybe you finally forgave somebody who shattered you and you didn't go back to the addiction that you once tempted by. It's an Ebenezer moment. Whatever it is, name it. Put your Ebenezer on the ground and say, this is where God thundered. Because sometimes the power to stand in tomorrow, stand tall in tomorrow, comes by remembering what God did yesterday. That's Ebenezer theology. And it's not stuck in the past. It anchors in the past so that you can face the future. And Samuel didn't put down the stone for himself. He put it there for the next generation, because one day a child was going to be walking by that rock, and he's going to turn to his grandfather and say, Granddad, what's up with the rock? And the old man's going to have a smile. He's going to say, let me tell you today that God thundered and he showed up. Y'all have those moments. Y'all have that ministry. So, don't let your Ebenezers get buried. Don't let your miracles go unnamed, untold. You tell the story. You mark the moment. You point to God's grace. Because there's hurting children out there in this world that belong to Him, that are heaven bound, that are just, they're searching. Verses 13 through 17. So the Philistines were subdued, and they came no more into the coast of Israel. And the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. And the cities which the Philistines had taken from Israel, were restored to Israel, from Ekron even to Gath. And the coast thereof did Israel deliver out of the hands of the Philistines. And there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. And Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. And he went from year to year in circuit to Bethel and Gilgal and Mizpah, and judged Israel in all those places. And his return was to Ramah, for there was his home. And there he judged Israel, and he built an altar unto the Lord. So if you're taking notes out to the side, maybe you want to write this down. The battle is over, but God's not done. Because the Philistines packed their bags, and notice they never came back. The storms had stopped, the crisis had calmed, but here's what most people think. Here's where the sermon ends. But if you stop here, if you stop at the battle being over, you kind of miss the point. Because grace isn't just about what God does in a moment. It's what he sustains us with in our life. I want you to look back at verse 13 again. The hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. That's grace with staying power. God didn't give them temporary relief. He gave them lasting peace. This isn't grace in some rental plan. This is grace of permanent residency. And I want you to mean verse 14. And forgive me if I get choked up. The cities which the Philistines had taken from Israel were restored to Israel. Come on now. God just doesn't stop the enemy. He reverses the loss. This is divine restitution. The towns that were taken, rebuilt. The borders that got blurred, redrawn. The things that were gone forever, given back. This is the part of grace we don't always preach loud enough. God just doesn't get you out. He gives back what the years have taken. How's the prophet put it? I'll restore what the cankerworm has taken. And you're tempted to believe it's all over so many times. It's over. But grace says to us, I can restore that which they've taken away. And just like these cities from Gath to Mizpah to Ekron, God can give back what you thought was permanently lost. Because grace is not an exit sign. It's a rebuilding permit. Let's close out. Verses 15 and 17 through 17. And Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life, and he went from year to year in a circuit to Bethel and Gilgal and Mizpah, and judged Israel in all those places. And his return was to Ramah. From there was his house, and there he judged Israel, and there he built an altar unto the Lord. Let's not skip this part. Samuel didn't dip out once the thunder had stopped. He didn't write a book and go all viral. He didn't drop a TikTok and get a blue check and bounce. It says, and Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. And he kept in it. And at Ramah, his hometown, he built an altar to the Lord. He stayed with the people. He stayed faithful. He built rhythms of worship, and that's what grace does. It grounds you. It doesn't just rescue you. Grace grounds us because grace isn't a one-time prayer. It's a way of life. And some people treat grace like it's for altar calls and hospital visits. But Samuel shows us this about grace. Grace builds systems. Grace builds altars in Ramah. It builds homes in worship. It builds habits that outlive the hype. Habits that outlive the hype. And Samuel lived a grace life, not just a grace moment. And I hear other ministers say, we got to have a breakthrough. We got to have a breakthrough. We don't need a new breakthrough every week. We need a rhythm of grace and a rhythm of remembrance and a habit of hope. We need a grace routine because grace is not fragile, it's formative. Grace should shape our days, our decisions, our relationships, and our worship, and our fellowship. We don't need to chase miracles if you're walking with the miracle worker. So, I want you to trust God, the same God who thundered for Israel when they were surrounded, who gave back the stolen cities and silenced the old enemies, is the same God who stands with you now. And He's not asking you to fix yourself. He's asking you to come as you are and to trust His mercy, even if you feel unqualified, even if you feel stained and cynical and too far gone. 1 Samuel 7 says otherwise, because the people of Israel didn't win the battle, God did. Religion tells you to try harder. Shame will tell you to hide. Guilt will tell you you're too late. But grace says, come unto me, all ye who are burdened and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Come with your brokenness. Come with your baggage. Come with your doubts and your debts. Because the same Jesus, the same God who thundered at Mizpah whispers to you now, come. Because Jesus shows up on Monday when you're overwhelmed. He walks into chemo rooms, into courtrooms. He sits with you on silent nights. He whispers when the enemy is shouting that you can trust God who never leaves the battle. So, let me close out and ask a couple of questions. What Philistines keep showing up in your life? What shame keeps whispering, you're not worth it? What part of your heart still believes that God is disappointed in you? I want you to know this. Know that you're not alone. You're not forgotten. You're not disqualified. You are invited. Invited to stop running. Invited to stop pretending. Invited to drop your sword, raise your Ebenezer, and to remember the mercy of God. If you'd like to serve Him as we do here at Camp Creek Church, we'll give you a chance to stand and sing